Today, we discuss Miro. Today, I want to talk about the hellscape that is technical diagramming, right? Everybody's nodding their heads right now, And there is a potential solution that I want to share. There was one name that several people brought up. I did some digging, and it's kind of nuts how much this program Miro has for developers. I have to share this. It could potentially be a game changer for you. So my favorite part about Miro is that half the work is already done. Like right now, typically we spend hours starting diagrams from scratch, gathering information. You get buy-in from every team. That's a lot of work to do. But Miro has a full set of integrations with the tools you're probably already using. And they also offer open APIs and SDKs for custom solutions for all those niche diagramming use cases we have to do, right? So the end result is the same, but it doesn't take forever. It's a massive, massive time saver. I'm transforming basic flowcharts and network architectures, and it all lives in one place. So are you using Miro? Have you used it? I want to hear. That's MIRO.com.
Welcome back to Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan, and in this episode, episode 10, we're speaking to one of the characters out in the middle of Speedway on the centre green. Kev Long has been centre green announcer at Ipswich and also Mildenhall for around 20 years. He's been doing this job. He always goes out there wearing a white jacket, and he's also got a little thing with rhyming intros for riders as well. Now, we're going to go right the way back to 1998, which was the first year that he was involved with Ipswich, and he's going to announce that legendary 1998 Ipswich team for us in just a bit. He's also going to be on the mic at the British final, find out what he's got in store for Jason Crump, hear all about those drenchings at the hands of Shane Parker, and we'll also discover his Speedway paradise as Kev designs his own perfect meeting. Find out what the components are to that before the end. But first of all, let's meet him, the man in the white jacket, Mr. Kev Long.
Yeah, good evening or afternoon, whatever time of the day it is that you're listening, viewer.
How did you get started in Speedway, though? And where did your journey begin with the sport?
Well, I guess you've got to look back to how I started watching Speedway, which goes right back to the early 70s. And when Speedway was reintroduced at Foxhall in 1969, we were still living as a family in Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk. So I was born and raised in Bury St Edmunds, and we didn't move to Kesgrave, which is where we moved to, which is just on the outskirts of Ipswich, until late in 1969. So the Speedway was up and running, and my dad used to come over from Bury St Edmunds to watch it with my brother, who's slightly older than me. And then obviously when we moved to Kesgrave, my dad and my brother used to go quite regularly. And I was never bothered. I mean, I was only sort of 6-7 years old at the time, so we used to sit with friends of my dad that he used to work with just on the edge of the heath, because in those days, and some of the listeners have probably seen the iconic shots of the Foxhall Heath car park, absolutely rammed with cars. I mean, thousands and thousands of cars. So we just used to set Mum and I over with Mary just on the edge of the heath. And then towards the end of the 72 season, I think it was, my mum said, "Oh, do you fancy going over tonight?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, okay, could do." Really quite not very bothered about it. And so that was 72. So I was 9, and so I went over and just was hooked straight away. I was watching the racing, because you go and still to this day you sort of see kids watching Speedway and they're running around or not really paying that much attention. I was absolutely glued to it from the first time I went. Back in the late 70s, and literally have been going to Foxhall ever since.
Yeah, and at what age were you when you let loose on the programme? Because I think that's almost a rite of passage, isn't it, where you're given your own pen and your own board, and it's like, there you go, son, you can fill in the score yourself now.
Oh yeah, no, I always had a programme, and meticulously neat with filling it in, even at that age. And I know sort of when my mum then started taking Samantha, one of my nieces, who was hooked on it as well, she was filling it in a programme at 5 and 6 years old, and she had teachers remark about how neat her handwriting was and how good her arithmetic was. Because you've got kids at that age that are adding 4s to 5s and then the cumulative score, and her teachers couldn't believe that, she was adding these numbers up in her head, and because that had all come from the filling in of the Speedway program. So a Speedway program, that's, you've got to have a Speedway program, haven't you? Otherwise it's a bit difficult to follow. I know I have been to sort of neutral meetings and individuals and thought, I won't bother with a program, but it's funny, if you don't have one, how lost you feel watching a Speedway meeting without one.
Yeah, because you don't really have any sense of the drama that's about to come either, do you? Because you can see where you're at in the meeting, and then you can see, hang on a minute, look at Heat 13 and Heat 14, who's coming up here, that's going to decide it. It sort of gives you the roadmap of maybe how things might pan out as well, and then you've got the excitement of seeing if that is the case.
Well, indeed, and I've always been fascinated with people's sort of attention to detail and their sort of microscopic filling in and the sort of obsession with the race times. If I miss a race time, I'm not too bothered. I'll just sort of put a dash or a blank, or I'll just put something that feels about right. And especially if I'm working, I don't always hear them, but you'll be amazed at the number of people that after a meeting will come up to me, both at Ipswich and when I also used to do Mildenhall. Oh, Kev, what was the time for such and such a race? And you give it to them, and also those tracks and they still exist, that insist on giving the race time to like 0.2 of a second. And I'm like, well, what is the point? Because most of these times, and my good friend Mark Stiles, who's the timekeeper at Ipswich, he still does it manually with a stopwatch. It's not done electronically with transponders, and I don't know why we quite haven't moved into that era yet, but that's by the by. But so it's still done with a stopwatch, so you've still got to rely on the timekeeper's reaction. So with any track record or any time, you've got to make allowances for the accuracy of the timekeeper. But yeah, it's the obsession with the race times. It's all part and parcel of the sport.
So you start off as many people involved in Speedway in whatever fashion do by going along and watching as a youngster and stuff. And when did that sort of line merge between being a fan and going along as an interested punter, as people do, to actually being involved in the sport and getting out there in front of the crowds at Ipswich in particular?
When we sort of started going away on coaches and stuff like that, and I remember in the 97 season we would go to all the meetings away. Our supporters club at Ipswich very active in arranging away meetings, and we'd be away, and we'd have such a laugh and a joke on the coaches, and people were saying to me, you'd be good on the centre green, why didn't you sort of get on the centre green? And I was like, well, I don't even know how to do it, let alone how to even get the job. And we were away. I remember we were away watching the Witches at Bellevue. We were away on a weekend tour, and we actually were staying in the same hotel as the riders and the management. And when we all got back to the hotel, we're sort of having a drink in the bar, and we're sort of sitting around, and I was having a conversation with John Louis, obviously one of the promotional team at the time, and said, I could do that job. And he's like, well, he said, we're sort of committed to what we're doing now for 97. He said, but who knows what we might do next year. And that was all that was sort of mentioned about it. But it was towards the end of the 97 season, the supporters club invited me to present their end of season event. Where you get together, rider awards are doled out, and everyone gets together for an end of season bash. Most clubs have them, and it's highlighted the end of the season. And so they invited me along to present the end of season awards in the evening. And so I put a lot of work into that, and a lot of research and things. And unbeknownst to me, that the promotional team at the time of John Louis, his then wife Magda Louis, and Mike Weston used it as an audition. It's a bit like X Factor for Speedway presenters. They just didn't have the red buzzers in front of them, and I didn't realise that they were watching my performance, inverted commas, to such an extent that with an eye to inviting me to take the job for 98. And that's exactly what happened at the end of the evening. They said, "Yep, we liked what you did. and we'd like to invite you to be the centre green presenter for the 1998 season. So, you know, that was amazing. And for a lifelong fan of Speedway, to actually get that job. And you've got to remember that John Erie, through the halcyon days of the sport, you know, the 60s, 70s and the 80s, I mean, John is regarded quite rightly as the best ever centre green presenter. To sort of follow, I didn't follow John's footsteps immediately. There were a few in between. Rob Chandler, who is a local radio presenter, did it for a few seasons and had various other sort of people giving it a go. And with no broadcasting experience whatsoever, I've never worked in broadcasting, to sort of just be a fan off the terraces given a microphone to do the job was life. I wouldn't say it was a lifetime ambition, because I'd never really thought about doing it up until that sort of point. But that was the first year, 98, and never looked back really.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about the 98 season in just a sec. What are your memories of that awards dinner though? And did they sort of put you through your paces in any particular way that you recall?
Well, I've never been, as you can probably gather, and people listening that know me, you know, won't be at all surprised that I've never been stuck for anything to say. I was quite nervous, and I know I burnt the midnight oil, like I said, in the preparation to that, and I knew which riders were going to be present, and so I thought, well, I'll get myself ultra prepared, and I'll get a few little cue cards ready. So, and I knew Jeremy Doncaster was coming up. And I'd made these cue cards, these little sort of postcard type cue cards, because I'd seen it on the sort of telly, you know, when presenters and you know think, what are they looking at? And it's very subtle. I thought, well, I didn't want to give it away, that I'd have reams and reams of paper, making it look like I was unprepared. So little subtle cue cards were going to sit in the palm of my hand. So up comes Jeremy, introduced Jeremy. Jeremy's come up and I say, oh, good evening, Jeremy, blah, 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 and, give him my first question. And I'd made bullet points, and I suppose I'd got about 6 or 7 bullet points for each rider. Things that I've plucked from the season, to talk about, and so on and so forth. So I've opened with Jeremy's opening question, so we've gone through the opening question. And as you will become to realise if you do ever interview Jeremy Doncaster, that you only have to give Jeremy one question and he'll give you 20 minutes. And so I've given Jeremy my opening question, and half thinking whilst I'm listening to Jeremy's response and half thinking what my next question is going to be, I was like, oh hang on, he's just answered that one, right? So hang on, there he goes again. Oh, he's just answered that one. Oh hang on. Oh, no, he's just answered that one. And Jeremy managed to answer all my predetermined questions as a result of answering just my opening questions. So from that, I learned very early on, because, again, presenting a Speedway meeting and interviewing people are two different things altogether. I mean, I do the in-house presentation for Rerun as well, for Rerun Productions. And, again, learning how to interview is a skill in itself, because you only have to have that example, that as you're asking a question, they're then going to give you maybe the answer to what your subsequent questions were going to be. So learned very early on that it doesn't pay to be too prepared. But having said that, I think Speedway fans know when the person that is presenting their meeting or their DVD or their podcast or whatever, they know if the person that is talking knows their stuff. And I think that's the fundamental thing that's the fundamental skill you have to have with presenting anything, even if it's a meeting at work or anything. If you know your stuff and you can speak confidently and passionately and enthusiastically about it, that goes a long way, I think.
You're listening to Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan. My guest in this episode is Kev Long, long-time centre green announcer at Ipswich Speedway. And you're just sort of alluding there to the fact that your first season in the middle at Ipswich was 1998. And you say Ipswich 98, and many people will say one of the greatest British Speedway league teams of all time. What a team to be involved in, and what a part of history to be involved in as well, for you to see that unfold before your very eyes.
Incredible. I mean, I can tell you how it's the most nervous of anything I've ever done in my entire life. That night, I know I got myself prepared. I had worked on various things that I wanted to do. The rhyming intros that became a bit of a trademark for me in the early years and still exist on occasion to this day. They'd all been written, and I remember being up with the supporters club guys, because I also sat on the supporters club committee at the same time as well. And I remember sitting up in their hut. Really, I just had to get away and try and clear my head. You know, and this was about 7 o'clock. This was before I was doing any other work, like with video companies or anything like that. We hadn't branched out into that aspect yet in '98. And I remember speaking to the team, the supporters club team, and I said, "Oh my God, I'm so nervous. Butterflies as big as bats flying around in my stomach," and I really couldn't see a way past that. But once we got going, then I just relaxed into it.
Must have made your job a little bit easier though. I mean, it's such a phenomenal team out there on the track though.
Well, the format for '98 fell into our favour, of course, because that was the year they experimented with 6-man teams, and permanent rider replacement essentially meant that 4 of the rides were nominated. And when you got the likes of Tony Ricardson, Thomas Golub, Chris Louis, it's going to take 3 of those rides. Your nominated rides most weeks were going to probably get you double figures alone. So that was the sort of key to that. And of course, everyone was bleating on about Thomas Golub, because he came in, if memory serves, on a 7.5 average, which at the time was the average that a newcomer to the UK leagues would come in on. Of course, once Golub had come in and sort of torn the rule book up, that rule was quickly amended for any newcomers to the British League coming in. I think their averages were then reassessed to 8 or maybe 8.5, might even be 9, to try and close that loophole. But Magda Louis, you see, she was very instrumental in bringing over Thomas, and he'd come over for the end of season event in '97 for our 16 lapper, and I think we announced again Golub's signature at the end of season event in '97, and Tony Ricardson's re-signing. So yeah, I mean, you could see on paper, but of course, as we know, Speedway isn't written on paper, and those guys have still got to perform. But yeah, it was something pretty special. I mean, we took coaches of people to away meetings. I remember quite vividly the Coventry away meetings at Brandon, and Colin Pratt saying, wish we could ride Ipswich every week, because he had some big crowds. I mean, not only did we as Ipswich take coaches loads, I mean, we took maybe 3-4 coaches as of away fans, but then the home fans, the local fans, and the neutrals came out to watch Ipswich because they were such a draw that year. And there were some fantastic meetings, and a lot of those meetings went down to the wire. And it is still a constant source of delight for me as an Ipswich fan that in 1998 we met Eastbourne 8 times, 4 times at Ipswich and 4 times at Arlington, and we beat them 8 times. There is still nothing as satisfying as a fan of Speedway. I'm not talking with my presenter's head on now. I'm talking as a fan of Speedway, to beat Eastbourne at Arlington. There is still something quite special about that. Even more than beating Kings Lynn at Saddlebow Road, such had become the sort of rivalry between Ipswich and Eastbourne. And despite all the little tricks that the late great Bob Dugard employed to try and ensure that the Eagles would win, the Witches still had the upper hand that season. And of course we took flares, we took ticker tape, we became synonymous and notorious for our ticker taping of the terraces. And I remember, it was quite funny, John, Terry Russell, who was involved at Eastbourne at the time, wrote this really strongly worded letter, you didn't have emails then, to John Lewis saying that He would encourage the Ipswich fans not to bring flares because Arlington Stadium sat in an area of outstanding natural beauty, and the fact, we couldn't have this going on. And he was annoyed because actually we'd taken flares one time, and where we used to stand as Ipswich fans going into the third bend, the wind trajectory on that night was towards the first and second bend. And if anybody knows the setup at Arlington, they also have their VIP suite of guests at the top of the stand. We didn't realise that. And on this evening, we'd let these flares off. I mean, we were very health and safety conscious. We took our own buckets of water in to plunge them in afterwards. And, we were very diligent. And these flares went off, and because they completely filled out their sponsors lounge, which got brand new sponsors in, who'd never been to Speedway before. You can imagine what that must have gone down like. But a few moments, and then John Cook took to the microphone. I remember this as well. Took to the microphone saying that he had fined the Ipswich promotion £150 because of the litter that we created with this ticker tape, which we used to rip up on the coaches going down, old newspapers and stuff, and it became quite synonymous with the Travelling Witches fans. My mum, bless her, when she was alive, she'd spend all winter cutting up ticker tape. So come March, she got bags of the stuff ready, and we absolutely flooded the third bend at Eastbourne with ticker tape on one occasion. And John Cook took to the microphone saying that he'd fined the Ipswich promotion £150 because that was what it was going to cost in additional clean-up costs for his cleaners. So I was enraged at hearing this. So I went and found a broom, and I swept up every bit of ticker tape that was on the terraces, put it back into the bags, went and found John Cook, presented him with the ticker tape in the bags, presented him with the broom, and I won't tell you where I told John Cook to put the broom, and I said, I think that will be an end of the £150 fine. I said, but John, just bear this in mind. If you don't want Ipswich to bring 2 coaches of fans to your stadium and encourage other people to come along as well, just say, and we won't come. We don't have to come, but we come to support our team, and we come to put money through your turnstiles and into your business. And after that, I think, there was a mutual respect, I think probably the word after that.
You're obviously a very vocal supporter. Have you had many standoffs with members of the opposition support or the opposition teams?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember going, and again, this is Coventry. These all sound Coventry related, but it's just come to me, the sort of answer to the direct question. Peter York, who did the Centre Green announcing at Coventry for many years, and did a lot of the big meetings. He always did the British final and a lot of the big open meetings. And I remember going to him and remonstrating with him in the pits after one of these meetings with Ipswich in '98, that his presentation was very, very unfair, in as much as he gave no credit to the travelling fans, no welcome to the travelling fans, and actually, when we launched into our war cries, made a specific point of talking over the war cries that we were doing. And you couldn't not hear our war cries. They were being shouted by 100, 150 people on the first and second bend at Coventry. So quite vociferous was the noise we were making. And I said to him, Peter, you've been really quite unfair tonight. I said, you haven't given any credit to the Witches riders when they've got 5-1. So they go over so a Coventry pairing, Hamill and Hancock, gone over the line. Oh, come on, Coventry, let's hear it for Hancock and Hamill. Louis and Rickardson go over the line. Nothing. Not even mentioned. Go straight to music or David Hammond in the box. And I said, you're being completely unfair. Okay, you are going to be a bit partisan, and let's not ever forget that home presenters are going to be partisan to the degree, but you've also got to be fair. I always pride myself on welcoming away fans, acknowledging great riding from the opposition, whether that's been a 5-1 or, an away rider getting a maximum, things like that. Credit where it's due, respect where it's due. And I think, I left Peter York with something to think about. I mean, I won't tell you the exact exchange because it's before the watershed. But, I think afterwards he realised that maybe, he needed to just be slightly more accommodating to the away support riders and appreciate things a bit more like that.
Yeah, well, it saves me from having to upload this as an explicit podcast as well. So, let's talk about your relationship with the riders, though, because you mentioned there you do your rhyming introductions, and I think you have had a particularly good relationship with a number of riders at Ipswich over the years. And that has sort of added an element of, I don't know, shall we say, soap opera to proceedings, perhaps over the course of the seasons as well, hasn't it?
Well, if you'd like, would you like me to recount all the rhymes from the Ipswich 98 team? Would you like a little bit of nostalgia?
Yes, please. Can you deliver them in the same way that you would have done on the centre green as well?
It won't take us long. We'll just wait for this train to go past.
There's the train.
Because I know a lot of people over the years have said to me, "Oh, what was that rhyme you used to do for so and so? What was that rhyme you used to do for so and so?"
Okay, so
and these ones I'm about to give you were the very first ones, and these stuck for many weeks until I then branched off and started to deviate with them.
Okay.
But I'll give you the 98 ones as delivered on the centre green at Foxhall in 98. Adios amigos, it says on his rear, and once he's in front you do well to get near. So make some noise and start your shouting. Here he is, Savalas clouting.
Yeah!
All air horns are banned at Foxhall.
Oh, are they?
Not allowed air horns.
All right.
You can clap or use a rattle.
Yeah, okay.
He's back for the Witches in 98, so please make welcome our checkmate. He's looking good in his fancy garb. He's fast, he's furious, he's Tony Sfarb.
Hey!
The next rider here is a real crowd pleaser. His female fans think he's a bit of a teaser. He's young, he's exciting, he's got the lot. It's the boy Nichols, it's Hot Shot Scott.
Fantastic.
He's leading the Witches yet again. A Grand Prix racer in the world's top 10. He's gunning for glory, believe you me. The Witches skipper, Chris Louis.
Whoop, whoop.
We've had Continentals through the years. Some brought us joy, but most brought us tears. Armando Castagna did the Italian job, but now, from Poland, it's Tomasz Golob.
Hey!
And make some noise wherever you are and cheer the Witches' Swedish superstar. Here he is, there can be only one. Raise the roof for Tony Rickardsson.
What a lineup.
What a lineup. So it's better in rhyming, isn't it?
Oh, fantastic. And would you do that when you're doing the team announcements at the start and then through the meeting as well?
No, they just got those on the parade because we line the riders up behind their bikes at Foxhall. So they got them. So the home riders got them every week, and then it would be selected away riders that would get them. Usually the number one would get them. Now I would at this point refer to my folder of rhymes, but I know that I don't have it here, unfortunately. My good friend Jason Colthorpe, who's probably listening, took them away for winter amusement, but I still have them all handwritten. But there's one that I did for Eastbourne, and it was when you think of Eastbourne, you think of one man out to beat the Witches if he can. The Eagles hold him in the highest regard. You bet he's here. It's Martin Dugard.
Hey!
You see, now that worked on a few levels. It was the rhyming of regard with Dugard I was particularly pleased with, but also getting in that You Bet reference, because if you remember, there used to be a TV programme on Saturday night called You Bet, where members of the general public were bet to do the most outrageous and extraordinary things. And Martin Dugard featured on it. Him and John Cook came up with the idea that Martin Dugard couldn't put a football into a net with the back wheel of his Speedway bike in the studio.
Really?
So his bet was to go on his bike and turn, and every time he turned the bike, his back wheel had to flick the ball and go into a net. And that was the idea behind the Brighton Bonanza, because John Cook and Martin Dugard then got together and thought, well, if you can ride round in such close, tight proximity as a TV studio, maybe you can ride round in close and tight proximity to the Brighton International Centre. And from that was the idea born that later then became the Brighton Bonanza.
Blimey, there you go, eh? It's wheels within wheels.
So I was particularly pleased that I managed to get the reference to You Bet. But in later, so it's always the visiting number one. But then it became a bit of a challenge to write them and finding the time to write them. And as I changed jobs and so on and so forth, I mean, in '98, it's a former job, so I don't have to sort of tell you, or don't have to worry about it anymore. But there'd be a couple of days a week that maybe were devoted entirely to writing rhymes for Speedway meetings, in between doing a little bit of work as well. But yeah, later on they became reserved for select riders, most notably Shane Parker and our soon-to-be visitor to Foxhall and the British final, Jason Crump. And I remember Crumpy used to come into the pits and was always avidly keen to know what his rhyme was going to be. I went up to Glasgow for Shane Parker's testimonial. Me and the aforementioned Jason Colethorpe, we flew up to Shane's testimonial and delivered about 12 verse rhyme on the centre green for Shane's testimonial. They were always good fun and quite a challenge to write, but quite pleasing when they're well received.
On the subject of Shane Parker, can you remember his rhyme?
No. I can remember most of the ends used to go, whether it's red, blue or green or something much darker, one thing's for sure, it's always Shane Parker. But of course we became more synonymous for my dousings of water.
Shane Parker spoke about this in our episode that we did with him. Here's what he had to say about you. I'll have a listen to it and you can react accordingly. Here we go.
I always had a lot of banter with Kev Long, who was the announcer at Ipswich for quite a while. Apparently, I came in from a race one day and my mechanic turned around and said to me, he goes, Jesus, that commentator just ripped into you and give you heaps. And I said, did he? And so I thought, all right, no worries. So I thought I'd grab a bucket of water and stroll out to the infield and tip the bucket of water over him, which I did. I drenched him. And he was standing there with a microphone in his hand. Anyway, I ended up getting pulled into the Ipswich office at the end of the meeting. This was after I'd rode for him, mind you. And one of the promoters at Ipswich, Mike Weston, was trying to get me banned. He wanted to get me banned because I could have electrocuted Kev Long with a microphone in his hand. And I turned around and said to Mike, I said, what, with a 9-volt battery in it, mate? I said, you got to be kidding.
That's exactly right. I do remember that meeting in the referee's office, and the referee, I think, if memory serves, it was Mick Bates, asking me if I wanted to take things any further. And I thought, well, bearing in mind, I was only about 3 weeks into the job, and I was like, oh no, just sort of live and learn. But the build up, the reason he was getting comments from me was because there'd been an exclusion. Now, bearing in mind, and what Shane doesn't mention in that clip there is that Shane always said to me, and he said, I think at the end of the meeting we had with the referee, was that, and I think Kings Lynn ended up losing 60-30 to Ipswich that night. He was like, he said, my job is to ride Speedway, score points, but also to entertain. He said, and people will go away from this meeting tonight, he said, thinking, oh, what an awful meeting, 60-30, they'll read the headlines in the paper, oh, Kings Lynn must have been rubbish, Ipswich must have been too dominant. And it made headline news in our local paper. The main headline was splashing times at Foxhall. There was a picture of me in the bucket of water on the front page. Good friend of mine, still to this day, and the official Ipswich photographer, Steve Waller, got a picture on the front page, a picture on the back page of the local paper, and a double page spread of pictures all around that incident. And Elvin King, who wrote for the Evening Star then as the Speedway correspondent, I think 2/3 of the report were about the dousing of water, because there was very little to write about the meeting itself. And that's what Shane always said, you know, you've got to leave them thinking about something else. He said, not only that, he said, next time I come with King's Lynn, people won't come because of the antics. And he's hijacked the tanker and the tractor at Foxhall before now, as he spoke about in his previous podcast. But the build up to that incident, I'm getting sidetracked, was that he'd been excluded from a race, and he was having none of it. He came out as if he hadn't been excluded. He was off gate one, I know that because he was closest to me. He'd been excluded. The referee had left the exclusion light on. I'm not sure quite what helmet colours we were on that year. It might have been white, it might have been green, it might have been purple, I can't remember. But and the start marshal has got the black flag and the coloured disc in front of him. Buster Chapman has come out as the team manager, trying to say, come on Shane, come back to the pitch, you've been excluded, mate, there's nothing we can do about it, just let it go. And I was having to fill over this, as we were talking about filling earlier on. I was like, well, what do I say? And I'm ad-libbing. You know, it's one thing you've got to do as a Speedway presenter, is learn to ad-lib. And I was like, oh, ladies and gentlemen, think nothing of this. I was going over the microphone. And I said, don't forget, I said, we had Mitch Shearer in our team a few years ago, because Mitch saw out his career in the UK with Ipswich in '93, I think it was. And, you know, Mitch was fiery. You know, he used to like to go up to the referee's box and remonstrate with the referees. You know, I mean, he was diminutive, Mitch, but he was fiery, as anyone listening that knows Mitch Shearer will testify. And I said, oh, don't worry about this little interlude, ladies and gentlemen. I said, we've seen remonstrations much better than this. I said, Mitch Shearer used to be much better at this than Shane Parker is trying to be. And that was what then got fed back to Shane, that I had done what I had said. And when he came out in the interval. And I thought, and we used to do our interval draw. We used to do the raffle in the interval. And I thought, oh, that's good. Shane's come out to pull the raffle. You know, not thinking anything about it. And not even seeing the bucket of water. My learned friend, Mr. Waller, knew something was up because he'd seen the bucket of water and followed the bucket of water, because being a top professional photographer, he knew where that was going. And so he was in the right place at the right time to get the pictures. And it just launched. And I can see it to this day coming towards me, this water. Just completely doused me. I think what caught me by surprise was more the fact that I was in the midst of drinking my interval cup of tea than anything else. And there are some great pictures, and I have got a montage that Steve gave me of the bucket of water and the aftermath of Shane then talking into my co-commentator, the late great Brian Knight's microphone at the time, because Brian used to be out on the centre green with me in the announcer's role. Shane then speaking into Brian's microphone, his response to what I had said. But yeah, that started a great relationship between us. I remember Scott Nichols' testimonial at Foxhall at the end of the meeting. Shane got the big stadium hose pipe that pumps out gallons and gallons of water. He got me pinned to the ground, and again, great pictures of me being pinned down to the ground, covered in this water. He even came round, especially on the end parade lap of honour, when he visited Foxhall for the last time as a rider. He came round with the Ipswich team. The Sheffield had lost, but he came round to take his last laps. And his Ipswich mechanic at the time, Nigel Birch, furnished him with a bucket of water coming out of the fourth bend. So just as we pulled up in front of homestand, my final bucket of water from Shane Parker, which I expected, but was nonetheless welcome. But the great thing about that Scott Nichols testimonial was that, as I said, Shane used to get these rhyming intros that, you know, again, that were near the knuckle. You know, they were just about broadcastable, given the fact that we were in afternoon meetings. You know, there was a little bit of dubious rhyming in there. But he had written a rhyming intro for me, which I thought was the ultimate compliment, you know. And he had written that on a plane somewhere. He was with his wife Angie, And she said, "What are you doing?" What are you doing? She said, "Oh," he said, "Well, I've got an invite to Scott Nicholls' testimonial at Ipswich." He said, "And I'm going to give Kevin Long a bit of his own medicine." And he painstakingly written his own, and it was about 6 verses, intro for me. Because he handed out, Brian was in on it, and he gave him his microphone. He delivered it perfectly. And yeah, I thought, and I said to him, the only thing I could say was touche, because it was it was fantastic payback in my own language, But yeah, some dousings of water, but that's what Speedway has lost, with characters lost to the sport like Shane Parker. Unfortunately, Speedway's got a little bit too clinical now. Rules and regulations have tightened up to such an extent that you can't do that sort of thing anymore. And I think Speedway's the poorer for it.
I want to talk about your presenting attire, because you're quite distinctive out on the centre green, because you're always wearing your white dinner jacket. Is it a full white suit, or is it just the jacket?
No, it's just the jacket. And I tell you the story. There is a story behind that. There has to be, doesn't there? But when I got invited to do the end of season event, the 97 one from the supporters club, I thought, well, I've got to stand out. People need to be able to see wherever I am at any given point. If the supporters club need me and I'm not on the stage, they'll be able to see me. The fans will be able to see me. The riders know where to come. So I thought, well, I'll get a white jacket. So I went to Gove's Menswear, which is still in Ipswich, and hired an outfit. It was a full dinner regalia, so it was trousers and everything, cummerband and a wing collared shirt and a bow tie. So and then for 98, I thought, well, maybe I'll use that as my sort of trademark. I hadn't seen it before. I know Ian Thomas, again the late great presenter who really knew how to put on a show. I knew he used to wear one back in the day for various events, but I hadn't seen a sort of current presenter wearing a white jacket, and I thought, well, that will actually do the job that I need it to do. People will be able to see me instantly. They'll know where I am on the centre. If I'm roaming, because a big part of my job, I was going to say now, of course we haven't done anything in 2020, but a big part of my job is to roam the terraces and go and meet up with fans, especially at Foxhall. We have a group of fans on the back straight called the Massive, and they make loads of noise, and we'll talk about them. Just make a side note, because we'll come back to them and talk about them in greater detail, the Massive. But and I thought, well, that will be very good, because people will know where I am at any given point. So as part of my 98, I thought, well, let's see if Coes want to sponsor me. So I wrote out a sort of sponsorship package. I said, you'll get your name in the programme, because in those days I used to also write a column in the programme. I said, you'll be in the programme. Obviously I'll give you multiple mentions, you'll become sort of linked in with it, and they gave me a very good deal. I got 2 white jackets, I think 2 sets of trousers, dinner shirt, cummerbund. Don't think I've got any cufflinks though, that was the only thing that was probably missing. And they kept that sponsorship up for a few years, but the managing director was very keen to get involved, and was delighted. So for many years I had the gears sponsored, but then when they sort of relinquished their sponsorship, I still knew the lady, Pat her name, and to this day she still works at Coes. She was in charge of the men's hire, so if ever the jackets were getting a bit tatty and I needed to replace one, I'd go and see Pat in menswear, in the hirewear, and she'd sell me a sort of try-on model, ones that they just have on the peg for fitting purposes, not the ones that you end up sort of hiring for your event. And she'd sell me those cheaply. So because
nice.
they might be a bit threadbare or a little bit stained, but when you're stood in the middle of the Foxhall terraces, and I tell you, the one that I'm going to wear at the British final, if you look at it closely, it's definitely seen better days. It's a little bit threadbare, but it will do for one meeting. But and then I know for our 98 end of season presentations, because it had been such a great season and we got so much to present, I'd gone back to Coes and said, look, I've been wearing the sponsored jacket. What else? It's a really big glitzy glamorous affair. What can I hire, or what could and they were, oh yeah, we'll sort you out, Kev. So I got this fantastic outfit, sort of three-quarter length jacket, sort of goes down to the sort of thigh, and it was all the embroidery on it was heavily embroidered, and it was just a knockout, matching waistcoat and stuff like that. And they said the only proviso is please don't wear it outside. You can wear it indoors, but don't wear it outside. And I never had the heart to tell Coase that I actually used it not only for our indoor presentation event, but also the Witches that year were accorded a civic reception in Ipswich by the mayor. So we had a big event on the town hall steps and the bikes on the town hall, and I wore it for that. But it was a fine evening, even though it was sort of October. But I took it back, and it was unblemished. No champagne on it, because that's the other scourge of a presenter when things are going well. You get quite a few bottles of champagne tipped over you, and I remember throughout the years lots of champagne. But the worst thing that I ever got covered in, you remember the ice bucket challenge, don't you? That was all the rage a few years ago. So you do the ice bucket challenge. So I got doused with 7 buckets of water. Then out of nowhere, Rowan Tungate comes up with some of the lime that they use for the start line, and threw a jug of lime over me. But then, out of nowhere, I hear this loud bang, and I disappear into white. And I thought, I've died and gone to heaven, because I could not see anything other than white. I was in the middle of this white cloud. And I thought, well, that's it. That must be what it's like to die and go to heaven, because I'm just in the middle of this white cloud, waiting for this cloud of white to disappear. And what it was Richie Worrall thought it would be hilarious to discharge a fire extinguisher over me from behind me. So I didn't even know it was coming. So it came from the rear, and he just blasted this fire extinguisher over me. And I was covered in the remnants of this CO2 fire extinguisher, of course, which are readily at hand. But the paramedic at the time, Jason Gillingham, said to me, he said, Kev, he said, don't, whatever you do, he said, you've obviously ingested a lot of that. He said, whatever you do, he said, don't sleep too far away from the bathroom tonight. He said, because those fire extinguishers, if you inhale in them, they can have a severe laxative effect. He said, so make sure that your run from the bedroom to the bathroom is sort of obstacle free tonight. He said, because you may need to get there in a bit of a hurry later on.
But imagine thinking you've died, and these are the clouds, and they're going to part, and you're going to see St. Peter at the pearly gates, and actually it's Richie Worrall with a fire extinguisher.
Richie Worrall. It was. But it was funny because he was mortified, because I was absolutely covered in this stuff. Fortunately, the white jacket went in on a 40-degree soft wash and came out, and that was all right. I managed to retrieve my glasses. There is a YouTube clip. If the listeners are interested, if you go onto YouTube and I think just put in Kev Long Speedway presenter, there is a YouTube clip of it that will come up, and you'll see it at the end. And I come out and I've got a white face. And I find my glasses, but Richie, bless him, was so distraught he actually brought me a bottle of wine the next time he came to Foxhall as a sort of an apology gift. So no hard feelings between me and Richie Worrall, but yeah, something that I never fail to remind him of on occasion.
All's well that ends well, thankfully, on that one. Your next meeting then is surely going to be a career highlight, and obviously we've been in a very weird year this year with very little Speedway in Great Britain, but the British final is going to be happening at Foxhall. As the time of recording this, we're sort of a week or so away from the event, and we know as well that there is going to be a couple of special guests joining from overseas. It's a bit more like a Commonwealth final of the olden days, really, isn't it? But you must be very much looking forward to getting back out there for this big meeting.
Well, yeah, just to take that point about the inclusion of the overseas riders, I think I've seen a lot of stuff online today and last couple of days since the announcement that Jason Crump was going to be participating, and I think people have got to realise, we have been starved of top line Speedway in this country for our entire season. There is one event being put on, as a test event, so Ipswich are putting it on, under government regulations and instructions, and I've got a meeting with Chris Louis next week, because apparently I'm deputy COVID minister for the evening.
Oh.
And I've got to read out all sorts of COVID instructions during the course of the evening. Anyway, I've got all that to learn next week.
You're not going to do that in rhyme, are you?
No, I don't. I don't think. Hang on, make a side note. Find words that
rhyme with COVID.
Rhyme with pandemic. So I've got all that to do. But also, I think people are losing track. Ipswich have invited a lot of riders. A lot of riders, have declined the invitation. That's their won't. They don't have to do it. They might be unprepared or don't want to go to the hassle for just one meeting a year, and all the stuff's been mothballed, or they might even be on holiday. Who knows? But so the authorities are trying to put the best lineup together, and I think. The inclusion of Jason Crump, coming back and coming out. I mean, he was going to be an Ipswich rider after all, let's not forget. So I think the inclusion of Jason Crump just takes the event to that sort of level. It's going to attract a lot of media interest that maybe it wouldn't have done with Jason's inclusion. Heaven forfend, we might even make the national newspapers. Let's see. But let's take it on its merits, on what it's worth. But yeah, I mean, in terms of career highlight. I mean, I remember going to the British final as a kid when they were at Coventry, and I mean, this is before we had our big days at Cardiff annually to look forward to. And to me, I was as excited about going to the British final at Coventry in those days as I was for Christmas Day. And I remember my dad would be up extra early. He would absolutely clean the car from top to bottom. The car would look immaculate. My mum would pack up the most fantastic picnic that we would have in the car park at Coventry, and with adjacent friends, supporters pull up next to each other on our picnic blankets, all part of it. Banners packed, programme boards at the ready, whistles, air horns, rattles, whatever. It was all part of the day. And I remember watching John Louis get his British final maximum in 1975. I remember, that epic runoff between Mark Lorham and Chris Louis in '97, and being halfway over the fence, screaming for Chris to do it, because obviously in that year Mark had moved on, and he was at Kings Lynn, and Chris was at Ipswich. Fierce rivals, best of friends, great mates, but a fantastic race. And unfortunately, the British final has lost a lot of its lustre over the years, and they have tried to reinvigorate it, with the winner of the British final becoming the wild card for Cardiff in recent times. So that's added that sort of spice element to it. But I always remember the British final as the biggest day in British Speedway. And let's hope what we're able to put on at Foxhall at the end of the month can be the best event that we can put on.
And now for an exclusive, you have the rhyming introduction for Jason Crump. And you mentioned before that Jason has always had an interest in this, and one of the reasons he was looking forward to riding for Ipswich was because he could look forward to regular intros from you. I think I heard what sealed the deal, to be honest. But you've written the introduction only today, and this is the only place where you can hear it from the man himself. So, ladies and gentlemen,
you'll hear it at Foxhall if you're one of the 1,000 lucky enough to come in. But
okay.
for Humans of Speedway listeners, here's an exclusive for you: Jason Crump's British final introduction. As a former world champion, he's held in high regard and invited along tonight as the meeting's wild card. Scheduled to be a witch in 2020, we were looking forward to him scoring points aplenty. But we'll have to make do with just one night, so here he is for your delight. Whether you love him or hate him, there really is no doubt. When he's in a race, you will definitely shout. You could liken his popularity to that of Donald Trump. So here for you tonight is Jason Crump.
Well, I think the genius with that is not only does it rhyme perfectly, but it's very topical and of the moment as well.
That's what I try, and I always try and end with the rider's last name if I can. So that's where I always start with a rhyme, is with the last line. So with the last word, Crump, in this case. So it's like, what rhymes with Crump? So then you go through, dum dum. Oh, sorry, that's my doorbell. Did you hear it?
It's just Jason Crump wanting a refund.
It's Jason asking, can I read it to him again? So and so it's always start with the last word and trying to find words that rhyme with that, which actually leads me on to talk about the Scott Nicholls nickname of Hot Shot Scott. And I've heard many people try and claim that they invented the moniker Hot Shot Scott. And I was like, well, no, because in that opening rhyme of Scott Nicholls back in '98, I end with, it's the boy Nicholls, it's Hot Shot Scott, because I couldn't get anything to rhyme with Nicholls. So I thought, well, I've got to get something to rhyme with Scott. So that's where that came from. But I try and make them slightly amusing, slightly topical, not too long. So I think Jason will be pleased with that.
I think he will, and good luck with the British final for when it comes round as well. I'm sure it'll be a fantastic meeting, and everybody's just desperate to see some decent speedway at the bottom line. That's where it is, isn't it?
Well, I think so. Ipswich is well placed for hosting an event like that. They continue to host, because for those that don't know, Foxhall, as well as being a speedway venue, is also a stock car venue. It's the largest tarmac oval raceway in Europe. So they have the World Hot Rod Championships there every year over a bumper speed weekend in July. And so they've continued to do banger racing and stock cars because they're not elite sport. So that's the sort of that's the contradiction. You can actually get more people into Foxhall watching stock car than you can speedway yet, because speedway is deemed by the government to be elite. We're only allowed these 1,000 visitors and spectators. But yes, Foxhall's well appointed for that. 2 big stands on the back straight that have gone in recent years. And plenty of terracing for people to be able to space out. So I hope everybody adheres to the sort of slightly strange sort of procedures that we're going to have to adopt on that night. But we'll have a British champion in 2020, and that there's no doubt. And not only that, but the trophy, the British Championship trophy, to me is the most iconic piece of silverware in World Speedway, not just British Speedway. But it is the most fantastic trophy. And the strange thing about the British Championship trophy? Do you know that on there's a spelling mistake?
No, I don't. I've never actually got so close up to it to check the spelling.
If you look, and there are close-ups, where it says British Championship, in the word ship, the word ship is spelled SIHP. Not SHIP. There's a spelling mistake on what I consider to be the most iconic trophy in British Speedway. But I love presenting that trophy, or seeing it presented. And whoever wins it at Ipswich at the end of the month, we'll have that honour.
Okay, right now let's turn our attention then to your dream meeting. Possibly the only meeting that could be better than the British final in your view. Who knows? We call it Speedway Paradise. It's just a little set of questions really for you to design what would be your dream meeting if you had the choice, with the perfect facilities and the perfect people involved as well. So let's kick off then. The first question is, which track would you like to see this raced on?
The track I'd like to see it raced on is a track that I used to love to go to. It's not with us. Well, the track is still there, and there's an active campaign to get it back in use. Is Oxford. Now, I used to love to go to Oxford on a Friday night. I'd often go just as a neutral Speedway fan because the dimensions were very similar to Ipswich. It had more banking on than Ipswich, so you got a different sort of style of riding at Oxford. We as Ipswich fans always used to congregate on the apex of the third and fourth bend. If those that know Oxford, there was the pits tunnel that came out of the pits. They sort of came from underground almost. We used to sort of stand to the left of that as you looked at the track. So you had a great view there. Always well prepared, good shape, I remember Andreas Johnson guested for the Witches once and was a fantastic guest. And this was not long after he started his career. I think he got paid maximum. I think he got 17+1 that night as a guest. But what fascinated me about Andreas that night was that he was also team riding and looking for his partner. So yeah, Oxford would be the track for me.
Okay, yeah, and I think it has been mentioned before, perhaps by somebody. I think it may have been Phil Morris, actually, in that episode we did not so long ago. But yeah, great track, and one we'd love to see back if they can make that happen. Which stadium, though, would that track go in?
Well, again, we've already mentioned it, and another track in similar, or not quite in similar circumstances. I mean, poor old Brandon, Coventry Stadium is looking very, very sad for itself these days, but not being demolished yet. And again, another campaign still active to get Brandon Coventry International Motor Speedway, as Peter York always used to address it, which used to tickle me. Yeah, I'd love to. I would put my meeting in Coventry because, as I mentioned earlier on, that thrill of going to Coventry on those British final nights or afternoons as a kid, as a youngster, as a teenager, and then watching the Witches there, certainly in '98, and many other individual events there. You know, I remember seeing Jeremy Doncaster get overseas or Commonwealth championships there, and some great events at Coventry. And in its day, you know, when it was at its height, I mean, Charles Ochiltree, I mean, he knew how to put on a show, and nothing was left unturned under his tenure of the promotion of Coventry Speedway. Yeah, I mean, it was a beautiful stadium. And let's hope that one day it's able to be resurrected. Probably not to its former glory because the amount of money that would cost nowadays. But, you know, there's still an active interest in putting on both Speedway and stock car and the Brisker Formula One there. So, you know, let's hope that comes off.
Yeah, and it's been a brilliant campaign that's been put on to save it and take that fight to the relevant authorities, because I think without that it would have been bulldozed without any second questions, really. So that's been a triumph. And we've got other clubs, like we mentioned Oxford, and then there's still a campaign to try and bring back Bradford as well into things, again with support from stock cars. And I think that's the other thing that's going in Speedway's favour, perhaps, that one or two of the stock car promoters, because some other venues have closed down, like the Old Bellevue and Stoke, you know, that they need more places to race stock cars too.
Yeah, I mean, what frustrates me, I think, more than anything, is when a stadium is closed and then bulldozed with the eye for redevelopment, and then it never gets redeveloped. I mean, you've got to look what happened at Smallmead at Reading. You know, that got bulldozed and it is erased to the ground now, although if you look at Google Earth pictures, you can still make out the track and the sort of rough dimensions and aspect of the stadium. But that was bulldozed with a view to, it's going to be redeveloped. For it to then just sit there and do nothing, you know, it could have continued to operate as a Speedway stadium if the developers weren't intending to develop it. You know, don't just get rid of it because you bought the land and you want rid. And that's a real frustration. It makes you think, you know, what has happened? Has that happened to a lot of tracks that have been demolished, erased, but never developed? I mean, a lot of iconic tracks. I mean, you see what's happening at Wimbledon. I mean, Wimbledon was an iconic Speedway stadium, iconic stock car stadium. I mean, that's all going to be luxury flats. It's going to be the new home of Wimbledon AFC, isn't it? And what they're doing there is a multi-million pound venture. But yeah, so it's a bit sad when they get closed and they're not redeveloped. But yeah, let's hope with the cases of Oxford and Coventry, as we've mentioned, that they do come off and we're able to see them as thriving tracks once again.
Let's move on to the big question now. Your 1 to 7 from any era, alive or not, no points limits. Who would you have riding for you?
Well, I did a similar exercise with Mike Bacon in our Ipswich Star, our local paper, last year. So it's fairly Ipswich heavy, but not all Ipswich riders. But so obviously, no self-respecting Ipswich or Ipswich My 1 to 7 could not have John Louis in, obviously. You know, the work that John Louis has done for Ipswich Speedway as a rider, a promoter and ambassador for Ipswich, you know, is second to none. You know, I mean, there are statues of football dignitaries in the town, you know, Sir Alf Ramsey and Sir Bobby Robson, and soon to be one of Kevin Beattie, former Ipswich Town player, and how John Louis has escaped having a statue erected in his honour, or any kind of recognition in terms of an M or OB or something like that for his services to the sport, along with like the likes of Len Silver. You know, these guys have given their life to the sport. And I remember, I guess one of the times watching John in action was I think it was 1974, and my dad had just bought himself a new Ford 3-litre Capri, and he was keen to give that a run out, and John was defending the Golden Helmet. You'll remember the Golden Helmet match race series.
Yes.
And John was defending that against Phil Crump at Newport on I think it was a Friday night, the original Newport Stadium this is. And so we drove from Kesgrave, so just on the outskirts of Ipswich, to Newport in Dad's 3-litre Capri. I mean, that did shift some. And we got there. It had been raining all the way there. I remember vividly driving over the Severn Bridge, and Dad's wipers were on double wiper speed, and it still couldn't clear the windscreen. And we think, well, we're not going to see any Speedway. But anyway, we get there. The track is waterlogged, but the meeting is still on. John arrives late because in those days, in those days, the changing rooms were the opposite side to the pits at Newport. So we could see John running across the centre green to the changing rooms and getting back literally as the parade music is about to go on. John comes out. He's defeated by Phil Crump in the Golden Helmet 2-0. And the most surprising thing of all, we then turn around and come straight home again. We don't even stay for the main event, which, if memory serves, was Ivan Major's Exeter Falcons against the Newport Wasps. We didn't even stay for the main event. We came straight home. We went all the way to Newport in the driving rain to watch John Louis be defeated 2-0 in the Golden Helmet and came home. I mean, you wouldn't get anyone doing that these days.
No, you wouldn't. That's a long old way as well. Okay, then. Your second one.
So John Louis there. Now, Jeremy Doncaster, like John, you know, a legend of Speedway in these parts and, you know, internationally as well. Like I say, he'd be a great guest for you, so try and get him on because he really would be fascinating to listen to. I mean, I've known Jeremy since back in the day. He used to work in Davy Brothers, which was a motorcycle shop in Foxhall, where he worked after he left school. And his motorcycle shop was opposite where little clothing boutique where my mum used to work, selling, you know, wool and ladies' haberdashery and stuff like that. So I bought my first moped from Jeremy Doncaster at 16 years old. Jeremy's a couple of years older than me, from Davy Brothers. And so I've known Jeremy for donkey's years, if you pardon the pun. And then when I was at college in 81, 82, the news broke locally that Jeremy was going to take up Speedway in that coming season. And I remember we were out collecting for charity because we formed part of the student association, and Jeremy was in a pub local to here, the Gove Hotel on Foxhall Road. And I remember seeing him rattling my sort of charity bucket and said, "Oh, Jeremy, you know, is it right you're going to be riding Speedway?" And as laid back as you can imagine, he said, "Oh yeah, mate, yeah, well, yeah, might as well give it a go," because he'd been prolific on the grass track and had been European grass track champion a couple of times. So John Berry had finally managed to sort of twist his arm to get him on Speedway bike. And in his early days, he didn't cover himself in a lot of glory in his first few meetings, but soon became, you know, a decent second stringer, a fantastic heat leader, captain for the Witches, won the double with Ipswich and Reading, and third in the world, an England international. So Jeremy gets his place, as does Thomas Golob. So we put Thomas in because he brought into the Ipswich that fever pitch excitement and anticipation of going to a Speedway meeting. They're obviously world class riders and world champions still riding in the UK at that time. But Thomas's inclusion at Foxhall, and say the fans that came out to see him in the 16 lapper at the end of the 97 season was testament to sort of the anticipation. And then 98, and again he had a few seasons at Foxhall. But there's a funny story about Thomas, because Thomas used to fly into Stansted on a Thursday, get picked up from the airport, ferry to Foxhall, and then he'd stay overnight at John Lewis' house at Kesgrave, Tiger Tower as we used to call it. So he'd stay overnight with John Lewis and then be ferried back to Stansted first thing Friday morning. And there was a guy that used to do the airport run regularly for John on a Friday morning, but this one week John was stuck, and I happened to have the day off, and John was talking about this in the office. He said, I don't know what I'm going to do, I haven't got anybody to take Thomas back, blah blah blah. So I said, well, I'll do it, I'm off tomorrow. He said, are you sure? So I said, yeah. So he said, we'll take my car. And John always used to have super powered cars, John was quick on the track, and he used to be like quick off the track as well. And so he said, come to mine. I think I had to get Thomas to Stansted for I think his flight was 7 o'clock. It's an hour and 10 minutes from Ipswich, so that sort of took us to before 6 o'clock. He said, you better be here till just after 5, just to make sure, 5 a.m. So I was like, right, okay, I didn't realise there was 2 5 o'clocks in one day. But yeah, early start. So anyway, I got there, didn't need to ring the bell. John had left the keys on the wheel arch. So I got in, Thomas comes out, morning Kevin, didn't speak much English. Morning Kevin, straight in, got a bottle of water and a banana. So straight in, the chair is reclined straight away, chair back, recline. He's asleep before I even get him off the estate where John lives. He's back asleep, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be an interesting ride, isn't it? Thomas is asleep, and almost instinctively, as if his body knows, an hour and 10 minutes, he wakes up just as I'm pulling into Stansted, into the drop-off zone. There's another train going past. I go into the pull-up, he wakens up. Thank you, Kevin. See you Thursday, and off he goes. So Thomas Golub is included. Scott Nichols is included in my 1 to 7 because Scott now has had 25 years as a professional speedway rider. From the time he first started. So he had so many years with Ipswich. He's represented a few clubs, but with Scott Nichols, you always get 110% on and off the track. He's worth as many points in the pits as he is on the track. I remember watching him with Lee Lanham doing exhibitions at Foxhall in the intervals back in the day. Probably never quite reached the heights internationally that he would have liked to have done and claimed a world championship for whatever reason, as so many riders do. Jeremy Doncaster will freely admit, he was never quite prepared enough and never quite raised his game mentally enough for those big meetings to sort of claim the ultimate prize. But Scott Nichols, and I'm great. I'm so pleased, Scott is working with the broadcasters now to bring us the Speedway to our homes, and is a great ambassador for Speedway. So in that regard, he gets his inclusion. Now Shane Parker gets an inclusion. You'd think that's strange as an all-time favourite, but he's an all-time favourite, and for all the reasons that we've already spoken about. Sure. But also on track, he is the master of the art of team riding. That was, worth a lot of points for the Witches over the years. So Shane gets his nomination there. Now for sort of off-track persona and ability to work the crowd, I've included Kim Janssen. Do you know of Kim Jansen?
I know of the name, but I don't know him personally in any way.
So he was a young rider that John Louis brought over from Sweden. Well, to give him his full title, it's Kim Jansen Everybody, because every time I introduced him, it was like, and off the outside in red, it's Kim Jansen Everybody. And that became sort of stuck as a bit of a catchphrase. But Kim was fantastic with the crowd. You know, he took so much great delight in taking an extra lap at Foxhall, because we've obviously got the perimeter stock car fence, you know, to take an extra lap and applaud back to the fans, because they love that sort of interaction with Kim, between Kim and the crowd. He was fantastic at that. Paralysed after a track crash in Sweden, and then he did visit Foxhall a few times. Because there was a group of supporters that did arranged an open golf day at nearby Rushmere Golf Course. We had that for a number of years, and I was invited along to sort of be the master of ceremonies at the sort of end of day play sort of prizes for the golf. So we always had a bit of interaction with Kim there. And so it was always good to see him. And I'm delighted for him. You know, he's made a life for himself back in Sweden, married now. Fathered a baby now, naturally. So I'm thrilled that, you know, he's carved a life for himself away from his Speedway career and what happened to him. But
fantastic.
Just for his sort of on track and his crowd likability. And it's a shame he couldn't have he couldn't have stayed riding Speedway when the Witches went into the second tier, because he'd have been a superstar at that slightly lower level. He was never going to be a world beater. You know, he'll admit that, but as a team man, he was worth a lot of money. And then my last place, I think we're on number 7.
Yes.
We dip into my time at Mildenhall, because as well as presenting at Ipswich, I have done a couple of stints at Mildenhall over the years, because they're in Suffolk and not too far away from me here. I'm in East Suffolk, they're in West Suffolk. And we get my final nomination goes to John Armstrong. Again, as a team man and as an ultimate Speedway professional, you know, John epitomises it all. You know, he always gives 100% on the bike, but off the track, you know, if ever there was a crash, you know, irrespective whether it be home rider or away rider, John would be the first one out of the pits to see if the rider was all right, you know, to reassure them, because a lot of the times the riders, especially young riders, and I see this a lot, they go into panic mode when they hit the dirt because they think the worst. They think they've broken something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they think that's their career over. You know, John would be on the scene as a fellow professional to sort of reassure them everything's going to be all right. You know, you're going to be okay, mate. You know, and he'd be out there first every time. Again, great team riding. Fantastic round Mildenhall because he's diminutive, so he was perfectly statured to score points round Mildenhall because it was just a tiny little circuit. A local hero, folk hero for the Mildenhall Fen Tigers supporters, and again a great man to have in your team. Always worth having John in there for points on off the track, really.
Fantastic.
I know
yeah.
what I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
I did look at your footer on your email that you sent me.
Yeah.
And you were a nominee in the One Voice Awards for 2020.
Yes.
And so the nominee is for Male Voice Artist of the Year,
Yeah.
Radio Commercial Best Performance,
Yeah.
Radio Promo Best Performance,
Mm-hmm.
Outstanding Live Event Announcer, Voice of Gold, Best Outtake of the Year. But the one that I want to ask you about is the Telephony in-store overall Best Performance. Now, is that the voice we hear when they go, opening checkout 3, please? Is that you? Or,
No.
Or the next customer, ticket number 12,
Yeah.
please? Is that you?
Unexpected item in bagging area.
Yes. Is that you?
No, it's
That's
not
not
me, but I do know who that is.
Ah.
Yeah, it's weird. You have these voiceover conventions and you're running into the voice of all sorts of everyday things. No, it's not. I do the in-store sort of adverts for the radio station that's inside all of the branches of Nicer,
Okay.
the corner shop. So I do all the in-store kind of All this month, you can get great deals on Pringles.
Oh, right. So you're not the guy I hear at Sainsbury's going, cleaner required in aisle 6, broken bottle of jam.
No. Not that guy, no. But if you were to call Eon to get your electricity bill sorted, then you will hear me. And if you listen, especially in Ipswich, if you listen to Ipswich 102,
I do.
I'm all over that.
Ah, right. But yes, I'm very good friends with Paul Morris, the station manager.
Yeah, well, I do all their promos. So this week on Ipswich 102, you can win something. In fact, it's Ipswich 102, who it's a bit of audio that was recorded for them that is best outtake of the year, I believe. And I think it involves earwax. So, but anyway, we'll find out this weekend if I win that. So that should be good.
Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck with that.
Right, and very quickly then, before I have to go, if you could pick one referee, it would be
Christina Turnbull.
Yes. There's a lot of love for Christina.
Because, again, small story. We have a group of fans on the back straight at Ipswich called the Massive. They make lots of noise. They bring a cacophony of equipment and musical instruments to really up the atmosphere. And they always have a big tub of sweets. So Christina was refereeing at Ipswich once. And with my microphone, I'm saying, Christina, because I'm the opposite side of the stadium to her. I said, Christina, would you like me to bring you back a lolly, dear? And I can see her nodding. So I take her back a lolly. We're riding Edinburgh on this particular night. Anyway, I deliver said lolly to Christina Turnbull. A couple of heats later, she has to make a decision. There's been a stoppage, and she has to make a decision. And it's quite a 50-50 as to whether the Ipswich or the Edinburgh rider is going to get excluded. Anyway, she excludes the Monarch. Anyway, John Campbell, who's their team manager, goes up to the referee's box and remonstrates with Christina that she has been bribed by the presenter with a lollipop, and that has influenced her decision to exclude the Edinburgh rider.
Wow, controversial times.
Well, yeah. And she sent me a great picture of her sucking on a lolly, of which description I can't, again, pre-watershed, tell you. But no, good. A very fair referee, very fair, makes the right decisions. And I always think the sign of a good referee is when you don't know who the referee has been at a Speedway meeting. Yeah. You get home and you go, oh, who was the referee? You know, they're not there for personal glory or to make a name for themselves. They're there to do the job, to referee the Speedway. And if you've been there, watched the Speedway and gone home and haven't even noticed who the referee is, they've done a very good job.
Absolutely. And on that subject, if you could change one rule, it would be?
Oh, I don't know. I think the amount of tinkering they've done with the rules in recent years, and I include in recent years for things like going from upright engines to laydowns, the inclusion of dirt deflectors, changing helmet colours from white to green to back again to white to yellow black to yellow black to yellow. You know, a lot of that is papering over some fairly big cracks in Speedway. So I think, you know, there's no one rule. There is no one rule. I suppose as opposed to a rule change, I would like to see the introduction of a rule, if I'm allowed to change the subject. Yeah. And that is when there's been an unsatisfactory start and the riders go on a time allowance, it's only a 1 minute time allowance. It's not 2 more minutes. Straight back, no reason to refuel. You haven't used any fuel. You know, you've made a start. You know, these bikes can do 16 laps on one tank of fuel. We know that, it's Foxhall. You know, don't need to refuel. You haven't got to change your gear. You're not going to put a new tyre on. You're too late to change the gearing ratio. Straight back to the tapes. That's what I'd like to see. And under a 1 minute official time allowance rather than given in that time. Because it's that break in the continuity and the momentum of a meeting that I think as a fan I get frustrated by, and I'm sure lots of people do. Nice shout.
And finally, the team who would be the opposition, any complete team from any league in history, who would it be to ride against your All-Stars?
Well, I would have to slightly change my All-Stars. I'd have to put a couple of guests in to my All-Stars. So, unfortunately, my All-Stars can't have Thomas Golub and Scott Nicholls in because they're unavailable. So I've got guests in for Thomas Golub, Nicky Pedersen guests for Thomas Golub, and guesting for Scott Nicholls because he's had a rubbish year and his average is low, is Jason Crump. because my All-Stars will be riding against the Ipswich Witches of 1998.
Fantastic. It had to be, didn't it? Well, look, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Kev. Some great stories, and all the best for when you're back in the middle again, firstly with the British final, but of course hopefully next year when things might be a bit more normal.
Well, I can't wait until we're back at Foxhall, so at the end of the month. It's 7:45, and I'm able to say my immortal words for our opening race. We've only just begun. It's heat number 1.
What a perfect way to end. My thanks to Kevin Long for joining us in this episode of Humans of Speedway. Hope you've enjoyed it too. Don't forget, you can leave us a rating. Give us some feedback as well, if you like, on whichever app you're using to listen to this. It all comes through in the end. And there's plenty more episodes for you to check out as well. If you're one of our new subscribers, welcome along. Thanks for enjoying this episode. And check out the other 9 episodes which are waiting for you. Something for all aspects of Speedway covered, including a look inside the referee's box with Chris Durno, hear from 7-time British champion Scott Nicholls, the man in the jazzy shirt from off the TV, you know him. Also, Nigel Pearson. We can also hear from Neil Machin, the legendary promoter of Sheffield, and many more to come in the future too. And of course, keep up to date with the latest happenings. Get all the news first into your news feed of your social media. We're on Facebook, search for Humans of Speedway, and follow our page there, and on Twitter at Speedway Humans to find out all the goss before it happens, and some preview clips as well. And until next time on Humans of Speedway, take care, and we'll speak soon.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.